Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the December meeting of the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. We will get started today in our traditional fashion where we have public comment. We post registration for public comment a couple of days prior to the meeting on the URA website. And we ask that public commenters keep their comments to 3 minutes. We have one public commenter today, Megan Confer-Hammond. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everybody. And so let me just get right into it. My name is Megan Confer-Hammond. I am the Interim Executive Director at the Fair Housing Partnership. And in short, you've heard me speak for the entirety of this past year. And so this morning, I am asking for the action for 2021 that takes us into the beginning of equitable change for Pittsburgh. I am asking that the HOF Advisory Board establishes a committee to quantify and timeline a fair housing lens to the HOF's funding disbursements over the 2021 calendar year. Additionally, given that the pandemic is daily worsening pre-existing inequities throughout the city, the county, and the country, that if needed, that an existing committee can take on the task to begin it for the month of December into January until such an equity committee is able to be established for 21 to ensure that we're simply doing the work. To give a concrete example, just to return back to the concept of a down payment and closing cost assistance program. To be concise, if we understand that the racial homeownership disparity in the Pittsburgh MSA is 38%, and then we look at the HOF's 2019 annual report, and we recognize that the DPCCAP served 32 Black households and 31 white households, we have a roughly 1-to-1 rate. Now, it's admirable, and I appreciate that the program is not worsening the racial homeownership disparity, but we do have to identify that it is maintaining it. Therefore, a fair housing lens based on this program, based on race, for example, has a goal to fill to address the racial homeownership gap over time so that the DPCCAP can serve Black households with a goal of a 7-to-5 ratio of Black to white applicants. And what the ratio does is it serves 40% more Black households than white households to start the process of addressing the racial inequity gap that we have in homeownership. Now remember that this goal isn't a mandate, it's not a requirement. We're not turning down white applicants, but we're taking outreach, which has become deprioritized to a sign-off sheet and the concept of affirmative marketing to invite those of us who have been marginalized into these systems of housing for so long in order to begin to address it with intention, the same intention that created the racial homeownership gap to begin with. And so to touch on, to understand, which we all get here, is that what is the foremost argument used against such diversity efforts? That there were no qualified applicants. No qualified applicants who were Black, disabled, Muslim, female, or so on. And so we all, I know, understand here that when a marginalized group has been continually oppressed from a space, saying that the door is open is not enough. And so affirmative marketing is not a form. It's about the flesh and blood of the Pittsburgh residents who have been intergenerationally disallowed from housing. And outreach isn't a buzzword, but a crucial tool to create an inclusive society. Today's inequity is not our fault, but it is our responsibility. And so just to explain, just for a quick second, is that Pittsburgh is my home, but it's hostile to who I am because of my identity. I've nearly gotten into physical brawls at bars and restaurants because I've had the audacity to ask that the closed captions be turned on the television. Shows and concerts don't offer sign language interpreters, but a headset that I fundamentally can't use. The devices at the movie theaters for closed captions work maybe 1 out of 3 times, and I don't want another free movie ticket for a movie I have a 1 in 3 chance of enjoying. Pittsburgh is my home. I was married at PNC Park. I have the pictures to prove it. But Pittsburgh is hostile to my identity because of our lack of diversity, our lack of inclusion. And I am here and you are here because in this body, we have the capacity to begin to make that change, to make our home accepting to who we are. And to the Pittsburghers who will judge me, yes, judge me, but judge me because I root for Washington's football team, not because I need the closed captions on in order to watch the football game. And there's a lot to judge me for that fandom. And again, FHP is ready to provide every assistance possible to this goal, but we need to be asked in order to devote the resources to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. And I do apologize for not having interpretation services today. We are working on getting them very consistent every month from here on out. Okay, so moving on. Next, if we can do roll call. Lena Andrews. Not here. Oliver Beasley.
Here.
Jamel Bay.
Here.
Joanna Dimming.
Here.
Knowledge Build Hudson. Not here. Jerome Jackson.
Here.
Teresa Kale Smith. Not here. Mark Masterson.
Here.
James Myers.
Here.
Paul Spradley. Not here. Sonia Tillman.
Here.
Derek Tillman.
Here.
Diamante Walker.
Here.
Adrian Wanahall.
Here.
Kelly Ware Seabrun.
Here.
Megan Winters.
Here.
Okay, let it be known that there is a quorum. First, the review and acceptance of minutes from the November 5th meeting. The minutes were distributed earlier this week. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, can I have someone make a motion for acceptance?
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, Derek made the first motion, Knowledge made the second. Let it be known for attendance that Knowledge is here now as well. Is there?
Jessica,
Yes.
there will be an interpreter joining us. She's just hopping on shortly. So city staff, please let in Maria. She will be the interpreter for today.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anyone need to abstain? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, first, homeowner assistance program. So I'm going to be passing this over to Jeremy to discuss the recommendation for approval of a contract with the Pittsburgh project for up to $250,000 to serve as a program administrator for the HAP program. Jeremy? Okay, I don't know what happened to Jeremy, but I can go ahead and talk a little bit about this. So the HAP program is, our homeowner assistance program. And this is a program where up to $30,000 worth of repairs done to homeowners' houses. We started the program with 6 nonprofit program administrators. We're building together Pittsburgh Habitat for Humanity, Oakland Planning and Development Corporation, Action Housing, Nazareth Housing Service, Hilltop Alliance, and I can't remember if I just said 5 or 6, but we have 6. And then we brought on 4 for-profit contractors as well to be able to help with the huge demand that we have. At this time, we are asking approval to bring on 1 more nonprofit contractor called the Pittsburgh Project. They are based in the north side, and we are asking that they start to work with the homeowners, especially the homeowners that have already applied to the program that live in the north side. And so the action today is to enter into a $250,000 contract with them. That will be enough to do around 9 houses or so, maybe a little less, 6 to 9 houses. The contract length would be 12 months. There is overhead factored in at 20%. I don't know if anyone is here from the Pittsburgh Project. Is anyone here from the Pittsburgh Project that would like to speak? Actually doesn't look like it.
Jessica, I think Charles Chapman is on the phone. Let me try and get him to unmute. I'm actually thinking he might have gotten off the line. Sorry, Jessica. I don't believe he's in here. I was mistaken.
That's okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding this?
Sorry, my power winked off and on here at the house, so I disconnected, but I'm back on.
Hi, Mark. Thanks.
So has the URA done work with the Pittsburgh Project in the past?
No, not that I am aware of. We have been aware of their work for years. I think they have been part of some sort of larger groups. There was a group called SHIP for a while that had several of the homeowner rehab groups together, and the URA did some work with the overall group, but we have not entered into any contracts with the Pittsburgh Project before.
So Jessica, I do have a question. Did you say that this money would go towards 6 to 9 homes? Is that what you said, or did I misunderstand that?
Yes, yes. So each house is approximately $30,000. So that's where that number comes from.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I assume that the geographic target, it'll kind of be based on areas close on the north side, or just kind of?
Yes. So the way we work with the program administrators is, we do operate this program in the entire city. So we ask the program administrators to be open to that if there's a reason for, if we need them to work in a certain neighborhood for a certain reason. With that said, though, we do try to, if a program administrator has a neighborhood they concentrate in, like the Hilltop Alliance concentrates in the Hilltop, and so far there's been enough homes in the Hilltop to keep them busy in the Hilltop. So the same sort of thing here, the Pittsburgh Project has asked, to try to stay in the north side to the extent possible. And as long as we have enough houses in the north side, which it appears like we do, they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, Joanna, their preference will be District 1, and we have about 30 households on the wait list in that district alone.
Are they gonna get, can you remind me, is this reimbursement based?
Yes.
The contractors have to upfront this money, okay. And they have a plan for that?
Yes.
I've been trying to get them to apply for a while now, a couple of years, and they have new leadership. So I'm glad to see that they're able to apply now. And I know we've had some homeowners that we've been waiting a couple of years to have the repairs done. So I'm hoping this will help with that.
Are there any other questions or comments? And if not, can someone make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend the approval of a contract with the Pittsburgh Project for up to $250,000 for administration of the HAP program.
I'll second that.
Mark made the motion, Jerome seconded. All those in favor?
Jessica,
Aye.
was there anybody that was abstaining from this conversation?
I'm going to abstain from the vote.
Derek's abstaining. Lena, I think I saw you join. Lena, are you there?
Having technical problems. Ah,
Right, Lena's having technical problems, but she needs to abstain because she works for Action Housing.
yes.
Is there
Just
anybody
one
else?
more question after that.
Yes, go ahead.
What have you asked about the capacity? Who's going to be managing this?
Yes, the Pittsburgh project will be administering it, and they have brought on a partner contractor to do the work because they do not have any construction on staff anymore. But in terms of capacity, we're going to just start with 1 or 2 at a time and see how that goes and go from there.
Okay, so I believe we had a motion and a second, and 2 people abstaining. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is a discussion regarding bylaws and the chair position. As you know, the URA, when we started administering this program in the summer of 2018, we hired 8 RNA advisors to help us kind of get the program started, and they did. Those of you that were on the committee at the time know that they did a wonderful job with some working groups and really helping us get focused and helping us identify the first 5 programs that we have been operating now for some time. So the URA, per the request of the advisory board, a few months ago, the advisory board started talking about, wanting to function, more as an advisory board that wasn't so much, led by URA staff, but led by each other on the advisory board. So we went back to HRNA and asked them to help us draft bylaws and also think through, what really is the role of the advisory board and the role of the chair position. So today we have Christiana from the HRNA Associates, who has agreed to join us this morning. They have been working very diligently on this, and just this week, produced a really strong working memo regarding their findings. So I distributed that draft memo to the advisory board last night. I don't know how many people have gotten a chance to look at it, but I did ask for Christiana to come to give us a very brief overview of what the process was for drafting that memo, and then to hit the highlights. The memo is I think structured really well, in the fact with the Roman numerals, it has about 5 different core sections to it. But for her to hit the highlights, and then today basically then just for the advisory board to discuss it, to find out if this is what you were hoping for, and any part of the content that needs discussed today, so that we can move forward getting bylaws in place early next year. So this is where we're at today. Christiana, I'd like to pass it over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Jessica?
Yes.
Great. Well, good morning. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak to you all. My name is Christiana. I'm a senior analyst at HRNA. For those of you who don't know, we are a consulting firm that specializes in sort of housing, economic development, and real estate. We've done quite a bit of work in Pittsburgh, so some of you may know us, and I've spoken to some of you directly. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how we approach this, sort of our high level findings, and maybe give you a chance to ask me any questions if you have any about our process or what we found. As Jessica said, we helped sort of research sort of policy priorities for the Housing Opportunity Fund a couple of years ago, and sort of after 2 years of operations, Jessica let us know, and we heard this in conversations with you all, that just having more clear structure and governing bylaws would be really helpful. And what we did was we first reviewed, we did sort of a scan of similar housing trust fund or housing opportunity fund advisory boards across the country and reviewed their bylaws, looking for best practices. Then we spoke with about 5 past and current board members one-on-one to understand kind of first, what the successes of the board have been and what has been going well and what's been running well, and then also kind of what the challenges have been and any sort of process related issues that have kept the board from being able to accomplish what they want to accomplish and also sort of function smoothly on a regular basis. That kind of helped us to understand what kind of questions we should be asking in a survey, which we circulated a couple weeks ago maybe, to all of you to get your feedback on what the biggest issues were going to be in the bylaws. And that was incredibly helpful. And I will just say that there was a fair amount of consensus on a lot of the questions in the survey, which was really helpful for us and said to us that there's a pretty clear sense amongst the board about sort of what needs to happen to help the board sort of function more smoothly and accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. We got 8 responses on the survey, and we incorporated those into our draft bylaws, which you all have. And I'll stop there quickly to take any questions about sort of our process before I move on.
Are there any questions about the process? Okay, I think you can move on.
Great. So what we heard in general is that, the board is only about 2 years old. So given that, and just given the fact that the enabling legislation did not provide a lot of structure or clarification about how the board should operate, given that things have been going well, that people feel like they've been able to, be impactful in their work, and that in general, people are engaged and very passionate about making sure that, the allocation plan and the funding is distributed in a way that meets, the public interest. What we heard was that, I would say some of the high level issues that we heard are that in general, it's really been difficult to get through everything that people want to do, partially because a lot goes into reviewing loan applications, and it's hard to be fully prepared with that material in advance and be able to get through that quickly, and that there hasn't been as much time to get into broader sort of policy priorities and issues that a lot of board members would like to be thinking about, or thinking more about the impact of the funding allocation so far. And so there were a couple, we set this up, the draft bylaws, into 5 sections: voting and participation, broad responsibilities of the board. And I will just say that is the one area that actually is at least partially covered in the enabling legislation. So we just added to that. Public engagement, that is something that came up as an area where there just wasn't, being very important to board members, but just where there was not a lot of clarity about roles and how that should be distributed between URA staff and the board. And then also working groups and committees is the 4th section. Best practice for these types of boards is really to have working groups and committees to be able to get into certain topics in much more detail, that where there just isn't time for these types of in-depth discussions during regular board meetings. And there was a lot of support amongst survey respondents and also in our interviews for creating working groups. And then finally, sorry, there's actually 2 more. The 5th is the establishment of officer positions. We lay out what the roles of a chair and vice chair should be. And then finally, we added an amendment to the original conflict of interest policy, which we helped write 2 years ago, which, we've heard that it's been a challenge that, that people who have a lot of experience in affordable housing financing often have to recuse themselves from conversations about loan applications. And so we amended the conflict of interest policy as well. I would say, to touch on the major points of what we actually recommend, more clarity about what participation of the board members should be and how board members should engage with the public. At a high level, attendance is important. Having the materials in a timely way and clear sort of delimitation of responsibilities of the chair, the URA staff, and the chair of any working group so that people can be well prepared for meetings. And the participation of board members in public meetings and helping to disseminate the survey and engage with the public so that the board can have meaningful feedback throughout the year. We also, provided a structure for working groups so that, board members can opt into working groups as they want and sort of establish within the working group their own structure around a chair and whether or not they want each of their working group sessions to be public. I will say that the most important thing I would say about what we're suggesting with the working groups is that their intent is truly for information gathering purposes. So being able to collect more detailed information and discuss in detail the topic that the working group is set up to cover, but not to be a group to suggest what the funding allocation should be, which is a recommendation that is really for the board to make as a whole in a public setting. I would say I will touch on the conflict of interest policy quickly. The amendment that we made is that, board members who have a clearly stated conflict of interest should be able to participate in conversations about loan application reviews up to the point when the vote is actually held, as long as that conflict of interest is clearly stated before the discussion starts. I'll stop there. Jessica, are there any other major points that you think we should bring up now?
No, I think that sounded really good. I mean, I guess I would only sort of want to emphasize, and we can maybe have this discussion a little bit later, but emphasize the part, regarding the committee structure, because this question has came up a couple times in the last 24 hours. Okay. So yeah, if you can maybe go into that a little bit, Christiana, sure. And how members need to be proactive and be the ones to create those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the working groups, so they're not required, but they are a helpful tool for being able to cover some topics that we've heard from board members they've not been able to go into in the type of detail they want. So for an example, a working group could be, to help contribute ideas to the public survey. Or the working group could be established to help come up with new funding priorities that they want to be able to have the time to do more research on in order to make a suggestion to the board about how they might think about funding allocation, the annual allocation plan. So it is up to board members, anyone on the board, in the way that it's drafted now, and all of this, of course, can be revised, but in this version, it's up to the board members to suggest a working group, and the board could vote, take a majority vote to establish a working group. They would also need to vote by majority to have a chair of the board who's really responsible for, setting up the meetings of the working group, setting the agenda for the working group. And it's really the responsibility of the working group to report back to the board during these regular meetings. And the chair would be responsible for that. URA staff can, attend those meetings as needed and help when they're able to, but it wouldn't be the expectation that they would be running those meetings. They could assist sort of as needed. It's really on the board to take the opportunity to set these up for the topics that they really care about and run them in a way that lets them accomplish, sort of what you want to accomplish. Non-board members, so outside professionals who might have, a lot of experience and, information to offer to a working group can join, but they can join the meetings, but can't actually join the working groups formally, but they could be present at meetings to sort of help provide information on this specific topic.
Great.
Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you, Christiana. And there's one other thing I wanted to point out quickly before we open it up for discussion. I think it's in either section 2 or 3 that talks about, in addition to the section 2, in addition to the legislative responsibilities, HRNA is proposing that the board continue to review the loan applications. And I think that came out of the survey results. Yeah, but I just one quick clarification. The way it reads now, it says the board is responsible for reviewing and approving loan applications. In accordance with the legislation, the URA board is the governing board for final approval. So we'll just have to add for reviewing and recommending approval.
Yes, thank you. That is what we meant.
Yes. Okay, so at this point, I'll open it up for comments from the advisory board. I guess just one more quick comment before I do that is, so this is the draft that the URA has, we hired HRNA, we're paying for this draft. So, at this point, we can open up for discussion, for comments. We want this to be something that the board is comfortable with. But if there are to be changes to this, I would ask, you can see the date here on the slide, I would ask that any proposed amendments to this be sent to us by December 17th, and we'll go over them as amendments at the January meeting, and people can kind of vote for those changes or not, because this is our starting document, and if there needs to be changes, we need to make sure that the advisory board by majority vote is comfortable with those changes. Okay, so I open it up for discussion.
So I have a question or a comment. After reading the bylaws, what I did not see in there, and I don't know if it's that important, but the actual makeup of the board and kind of like who we represent. So those various areas that we represent, because in section 2.2, it talks about us seeking feedback from the groups that we represent. And so just kind of putting that out there, who we are representing on the board, I think that should be part of the bylaws.
Yeah, that's a good comment. So that is currently in the enabling legislation for the fund. All 17 seats and who they represent is in that. I do think we could probably include that portion of the legislation, as a amendment, just as an attachment or an exhibit to the bylaw document, if the advisory board, feels that would be useful.
Yeah, I understood that they were in that, and I just was wondering if it should be in our bylaws as well, so that if people want to know that, they don't have to read our bylaws and then go back to legislation to find out who we might represent. So I was just kind of putting it in there for that purpose.
Great.
That's helpful. Thanks, Jerome. I should have said at the beginning that we didn't add sort of the text from the enabling legislation here, except to clarify what the responsibilities are in the enabling legislation. But I think that's a great point. And what we can do is, sort of add sections that say, for board composition C attachment, just to make it easier for people.
Jerome, did I also hear, or maybe I'm just took something and ran with it, but some accountability metrics, it sounded like you were also perhaps referencing about making sure that we're actually representing those communities as well, or speaking to our communities and not just saying, hey, I'm the East and representative and do whatever you want without any, without checking back in. Okay.
Yes, Kelly, you're exactly right. Yes. Yep, that was in there. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think that's a great idea. I'm not sure how we operationalize that. Maybe make a working group to operationalize how to do that. But I definitely like the idea of not having self-appointed or mayoral appointed kings that do whatever without checking in. So I'd be interested in talking to you how to maybe get that in there.
So this is Sonia. I have a comment and a question. Thinking on Megan's public comment earlier, I wonder if we should include in here, perhaps in section 559, a verification that an interpreter has been secured and for each meeting. And the question or clarification is, in 5.8, it talks about the officer position being 2 years. Does that mean, with an option of a 3rd year, depending on the person's term, but does that mean that the term has to be 2 years? And so someone starting their 3rd year could not serve as an officer?
So if I understand correctly, you're asking if someone served 2 years, they could then not have
I guess I'm asking for clarification on the language and whether the term has to be 2 years. So we, at most, well, I guess we're the beginning board. Each term I think is 3 years. And so do you then have to be elected as a chair or vice chair to start in year 2? Or could you start in year 3 and serve 1 year because you don't necessarily know if you are going to be reelected? Because I feel like the way it's currently stated, it says the terms are 2 years.
I would suggest that just be 1 year for that very reason that, you've got new folks that come on every year. They're 1/3 of us, or, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 year, but so you've got potential for a third or a quarter of the board to be new each year. Everybody should have a chance to vote for the board chair on the board. So why not just have it every year? It's, folks get reelected. That's what every nonprofit that I've been on that has staggered terms like that where there's new ones each year, you just have the officers voted each year. And, I think that is like the first thing that happens each, January. But that would be my suggestion, to keep it clean. And then you don't have that where, hey, somebody gets elected, they're supposed to serve 2 years and their term expires and they're not reappointed. And you get into losing track of what you're supposed to be doing and when you're supposed to be doing it.
So Mark, would you also, are you fine with the max term being 3 years, or would you suggest the max being 2?
I would say make it the maximum could be whatever the term is. If we're 3-year terms, make that the max that somebody could run. So if you're elected and you serve, that you could go up to 3 years as a board chair or vice chair.
But the way that is stated in the current document is that you have to be on the board for at least a year before you can run for a position, which then means that, if someone has been on the board a year and then is elected to a position, they only have 1 year left. And so to make it a 3-year term, that person may not be back on the board again, or even a 2-year term in that case.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it would be a 3-year term. I'm just saying that they could run up to 3 times. Right. It would be a 1-year term, but they could be reelected to it 3 times.
1-year term makes sense to me with options to run again.
So does it make sense, as we're talking about chairs and terms? I think that we've had a lot of conversations as a board about the values of the program, the legislation, the intent. As we're starting to think about what the structure of this board looks like, and subcommittees, working groups, chairs, officers of the committee, to really have a very robust outline of the charge of individuals that would be, a chair who would lead a subcommittee, that outline these key critical issues that we talk about, but we never dive deeply into. And I'm seeing, Megan, are we looking to, really in this language put forward that whomever is taking on these roles is really making the commitment to ensure that affordable housing conversations are at the table, conversations of equity, racial disparity across the community, inclusive housing on a variety of levels, because I think when we talk about inclusive housing, we can talk about zoning, we can actually talk about infrastructure, we can talk about, mixed use properties. I think that the structure is key, but sometimes in our structural conversations, we miss those values. And I'm curious as to, whether or not this is a really great time to start wrapping that language, that intent, that structure, in a looser term, into this more formalized structure that we're talking about for the board.
You left everybody speechless, Adrian.
Sorry, but
I guess I'm not speechless. I don't know how, what are you suggesting specifically? I mean, I understand the point that we don't delve very deeply in, because it doesn't seem like we have a chance or are not structured to do it that way, but what are you specifically proposing to change to this, like as an example?
So as an example, the chair makes the commitment. We've determined as a board, there are 6 key lenses that we need to be looking at to make decisions. The chair commits not only to being the chair, to guiding the meeting, to Robert's Rules of Order, but also commits to these 6 key items need to be part of the conversation when we are making funding decisions, when we are choosing applications, when we are planning for our allocations. And
should we all be committing to that, to acting with fidelity in regards to those areas?
Absolutely.
I mean, I would be interested in seeing that perhaps incorporated as part of our bylaws.
It seems like the work as far as implementing that is probably connected to a committee. Kind of, what Megan talked about earlier with the fair housing comments. It seems like, the committee will work to actually bring that to fruition. But I agree that that's a value we should all hold being on this board in the first place.
Yeah, I think this is a question of whether or not the board should, the chairman or chairperson should shepherd a set of a mission, vision, and values for the HOF, and to really understand why this advisory board exists and the lens through which we evaluate public policy when it comes to, investing public dollars in advancing affordable housing. And so I think that the chair has a responsibility to help establish those values, but it is incumbent upon each of us to uphold those values in our independent capacity, as well as being a part of any committee. I think that we did have a very brief discussion around fair housing and what that means to this committee. I think that is the point of our work. And we do not see it strategically sort of nested in a lot of the decisions that we make right now. So I think going into 2021, not only do we need a committee around that, I think we need to establish it as a value, if that is what we are all, saying that we support and we champion.
Very well said.
Can we add it under the board responsibilities on page 3? That the board will keep equity, fair housing, and the other things Adrian said at the forefront of the conversation and funding decisions. We could also add it under chair.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is that you put those values lenses in both the board chair and the board member responsibilities included in the definition.
Is there somebody that would like to volunteer to send me that language? Because I mean, I could try, but I prefer it come from from a member of the board to craft a value language, and then we can add it in. I mean, I think one potential goal, and it's really up to you. I mean, this is a document for the use of this board, but if you would like to get this approved in January, you know, we need a votable document in January. So I don't know how to do that. We could either take this document as it currently exists, you can propose proposed amendments in January, or if you want to send me your red lines now, I could try to put it together, have you all look at it via email. You know, if it looks reasonable, we could move that document in January, and any additional amendments could be made at that time. But to do that, I'm going to need people to send me red lines. So who would like to volunteer to send red lines for that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure why, but I don't have these documents. For some reason, I'm not getting anything from HOF. Sorry, this is Adrienne. I'm just not getting any materials. I'm not getting the invites and I'm not getting materials. So if I have materials, I'm happy to contribute.
Okay, well, we'll look into that. Adrienne, I don't know what happened. I don't know how you dropped off of our list, but we'll try to figure that out.
We may want to check whether or not we have an old email in the HOF alias as well.
Okay.
I can forward it to her. I already started redlining, and if she wants to add her lines.
Thanks, Joanna.
No problem.
Does it make sense to maybe put it like on a OneDrive file so that the edits are in one document?
Oh, Google Drive, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll do that this afternoon. The only thing is if 10 people are editing it, I mean, I just don't, you know, not everybody agrees with everybody's edits, and some edits might be contradictory. So we can try, we can see what we get, you know, by the date I put on the slide, and I can send it out. But then if people have concerns with the, you know, if there's like double comments or contrary comments, we'll have to get those addressed.
Sounds like deliberative democracy. I like it.
Yeah, so maybe we should do comments instead of redlining, and then we can discuss which way to go on each one.
Sure.
If they can contradict each other.
I like that idea.
I have a question about the conflict of interest amendment. So I'm reading it, it's saying, you know, if you have a conflict of interest, you may participate in discussions as long as you clearly state that before the discussion. And then also as it relates to the vote, I think 6.2, is this saying that you can also vote as long as you don't have a financial interest in that project, or can you provide some clarity around that?
Yeah, so what we heard from the survey responses is that people with conflicts of interest in general should be able to vote on the annual allocation. They should just not be able to vote on funding that they're eligible for specifically. So those would be the only votes that they would have to abstain from.
But they would still be able to participate in the discussion though, correct?
Yes, yes.
And what happens where there's conflicts that are, you know, it might not be a project that you're doing, but you're working with an agency that's selling land to a project or providing financing, or maybe you've provided financing that is going to be taken out. You know, you've done the interim financing and you're going to be taken out. So a banker like our organization runs into that quite a bit. Is that I've always assumed that that's a conflict because we're getting a loan repaid, that's a financial benefit to us.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
But
That's
when
a
you've
good
got
point. It may make sense to add language about financing as well.
And if you've got administration or URA officials where they've got land or other things that they're of value that'll be there, you know, is that a conflict, even though it might not be, you know, the mayor's department that's selling the property? Is that, you know, how far do you stretch that conflict of interest, I guess, is, you know, to put some clarity around that so everybody knows.
Yep.
I had one other question, just sort of with the working groups. Has that been reviewed? Like, do we have to pay attention to the Sunshine Act in Pennsylvania? Has an attorney looked at this or not?
So I don't know if David is on, but it is, David, can you speak towards our interpretation of the Sunshine Act?
Yeah, I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not an attorney, and I think there are some attorneys on this advisory board, so I would defer to them or URA legal counsel. But my best understanding from prior conversations with attorneys is that, you know, you guys are an advisory board and not subject to the Sunshine Law or Open Records Act. You're making sort of recommendations to a governing board. You're not an official sort of arm of government. So, but once again, not an attorney, and I can't make that clear enough.
I also wanted to chime in and say that Christiana agreed to do this at the very last minute, and she does have a meeting at 10 o'clock. So are there any final questions specific to HRNA?
Had some changes. I can put them on the Google Doc, but I think there should be a written report from the working group provided, and I think there's going to be cases, and maybe the chair of the working group can ask URA staff. I just think that piece is probably going to be critical because the working group's not going to be able to do stuff. They're going to need information. I guess my concern is that they're going to be kind of left out there, not getting the support or not really making the impact because the URA staff have kind of recused themselves of any obligation to the working group. So I guess I'm a little concerned about that.
Oh.
So it needs to be like a requirement or something that.
You know, the working groups really need to be, you know, owned by you guys, as you are the advisory board. These are topics you're interested in delving into. As staff, we will get information. You know, we will definitely be the conduits of information. And if we are needed at a meeting to provide information, you know, we can do that. But we are not, you know, we're operating programs, we're making loans. We really, you know, are not able to staff working groups, you know, from that standpoint.
You know, it's a capacity issue, but there's certain things like, you know, developing criteria, like that is an integral thing that we need staff, you know, to work with us on. And
providing data on how the program, you know, demographic data and other things about who's applying, and there's stuff that you guys know and have information on that would be critical to those working groups.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that we will need to be a conduit for information.
A lot of the discussions are kind of integral to how things function. I mean, we don't want to overburden staff, and understand you have limited time in the day, and so do we, you know, but I think there should be very close collaboration on some of these issues.
I also noticed that there was a recommendation to hire new staff in the URA to help you know, the officers prepare for board meetings. So maybe that new staff can also be that conduit for information, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, that was an HRNA recommendation. The URA has not talked about that. We haven't talked about, you know, if we, you know, can do that administratively or not. You know, once again, this is a document for you guys to help you figure out how you want to organize yourself. I think the details of how the URA fits in with that, we will need to figure those out.
I had a question for Christiana.
Oh, go ahead.
I know 5.4.1, officers should not represent themselves as representatives of the URA. What does that mean?
So I will actually let the URA staff speak to that because they had asked for it. It's what it's meant to be is to clarify that. So for example, like we're suggesting that the chair not be URA staff, and it's meant to provide more clarity around the fact that the board is independent of the URA staff and not representing themselves as part of the URA. But if the staff has additional comments on that, I would absolutely let them speak to it. I unfortunately have to run to another meeting, but I will look at all of your comments closely that you provide in the Google Doc, and feel free to reach out and provide additional comments. Hopefully we can get this finalized into something that everyone is excited about. So thank you.
Yeah, I did ask for them to add that. I think, when you're looking at criteria and, metrics and things like that, I just want to make sure it's clear to folks that this is advisory board, criteria and metrics. The URA, we are big, we are a lending agency, we're a government entity. We may have our own, and we also may have, we have our own approval system. So there is a bit of a strange overlap here. And so the statement was really just, these are if evaluation criteria comes out, it needs to be clear that it is, that of the advisory board and not necessarily that of the URA.
All right, bye. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Let me bounce back to Derek's comment about the staff. I don't know if this is where he was going, but we want to make sure so the assumption would be that with this new structure, some of those things that you spend your time on, Jess, and your staff, some of that will be shifted, and that would free up some of your time. But any new staff that the URA hires, it still has to come out of that $1 million that the URA gets from this budget. There's no new money going to the URA for staffing.
That is correct.
Right.
Anything else? We will put it on OneDrive this afternoon, get everybody to OneDrive link. We need to have comments by 2 weeks from today. That date was on the slide, but 2 weeks from today, if it's the desired advisory board to get a document together that can be voted on and approved in January. January could become a bit of a annual meeting type of thing. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no further, I saw a couple thumbs up. So if there's no further comments on this, we'll move on in the agenda. Bettina, if you can put the slideshow back up.
I guess I did have another comment about two things. One is fund applicants will not be required to present at the board meeting or the board during public meetings. And it has been nice to have people, so I'm wondering if that's changing. That changes how we do things. I'm assuming maybe to save time. And I'll start with that.
Yeah, I wish Christiana was still here. I'm pretty sure she told us that came out of the survey results and possibly the interviews that I think if people were concerned about time and sort of thought, that to save time, they did not need that component of it. I think that's where it came from, but otherwise I don't know. I could ask her and make sure.
And shall not be required means they could still be invited, right? They're not required.
It's really, up to the advisory board.
And then the second thing, the board is not responsible for reviewing or approving funding allocations from any other source of public funds. Understanding that, we are set up to advise on the HOF funds. It is a little difficult to make those decisions in a vacuum, especially like when we're helping, some of our ideas have turned into other sources of funds. you know, there's funding for the programs that we oversee that comes from other places. So I understand like the desire for that clarity, but wondering if there's still some sharing of information as it can help us make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are set up to defer to HLF. That's why that statement's in there. You know, the URA is a very open, public, transparent agency. We share information on all of our programs.
Yeah, like when we did the allocation plan, you know, you guys showed us we have this much allocated from this other source for this program. So, yeah, I'm just thinking like when we talk about, you know, the fair housing criteria, like if we're just, you know, tracking, oh great, HOF is like being proactive, but like we have 3 other funding sources, we're not tracking the same things on, or we're not going to report to HOF on. Yeah, I just think while we may not be responsible, it may be useful to have some integration when the programs are programs that we set up. Like, you know, that we can review the outcomes of the programs, even if there's multiple funding sources. But if HOF, you know, it's an HOF program, it seems like we should be able to review the.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an example of, please, I'll just reemphasize what Kelly said earlier. Please put all your sort of edits and comments in the comment part of the document. You know, I'm a little worried that we're going to have conflicting comments. I'm a little worried that, you know, some comments might not jive with the legislation. So once we get all comments, we'll look to see what they are, and we'll probably assimilate the list of all the comments and then work with HRNA to try to get a revised document. But not all comments are probably going to be able to be included in the document, especially if they're contradictory to the legislation, or if comments are contradictory to each other. That's not a word, but contradictory to each other. I'm still not saying the word right.
Contradictory.
Thank you.
I actually have to get off. I have to be down at a ribbon cutting for a hotel project at 10:30. But I wanted to make a comment about the public comments that were made before about fair housing and how we look at our programs and our outcomes. And I'm hoping that we can pledge that in 2021 that that's going to be a significant component of how we're looking at the funding that we've got. Since we're out of the surplus, we're going to be making decisions between different projects in a lot of these programs, and maybe we can look at how the programs that are consumer-based are designed so that we're getting to the desired outcomes that we all want to see. But thank you. I'm sorry I have to leave early. It's just I didn't plan. This isn't anything that's within my control to plan the schedule for this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
I've also got to hop off. Is there anything else that's needed from an administrative standpoint? Like, we are not casting any more votes, correct?
Correct. We are not casting.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can we move on, or is there any other final comments on this? Okay, so the rest of the meeting is really, you know, some of the same slides you've seen in the past, showing just that the map is getting busier and busier. Housing stabilization program in yellow, homeowner assistance program in blue. Some of those dots are being covered by the yellow, but you can see that those 2 programs are all over the city, as is the down payment and closing cost assistance. And demo dollars, the shelter did officially close. The funding for the shelter did close. Commitments and closings to date for the development programs. You can see the rental and the for sale. I think we made a new for sale commitment last month. Trying to think if we had any closings. Evan, did we have any closings this past month?
Not for sale, no. Or I mean, the Givner building closed in November.
Right.
So yeah, that's the one new closing.
That's right. The Givner building, congratulations to Jerome and everyone that was working on that project that did close. Next slide. So here's just what's been allocated for the last 3 years. This does not include the 2021 allocation. And just real quick, a quick update on that. That was, I think it was introduced this week and will be discussed next week at City Council for a final vote the following week. David, is that correct?
The annual allocation plan is, yes, up for committee discussion next week, and then should be up for a final vote the week after that, which puts us in line with sort of the enabling legislation having annual allocation plans synced up with calendar years. So I think that's actually something to celebrate. The board should be really excited about.
Yes. After starting in the middle of the year in 2018, we are finally caught up and on the regular path to having the fall allocation plan, worked on and approved. So you can see the allocations here. To point out, we are now adding some CDBG to our homeowner assistance program. That's what the 1.6 million of additional resources are for the homeowner assistance program, just to be able to help us get through, the list that we have in a faster manner. And now that we're bringing on new program administrators, such as the Pittsburgh Project, hopefully we can move faster. And then the housing stabilization program, of course, really exciting thing that happened on Tuesday was the final vote for another, for more money to come to us through the CDBG CARES Act. So that is why that number has now increased as well. So you can see that there. Next slide. And then, here's just our unit counts, which is, really impressive. The demonstration, and we've talked about this before, is high because of the shelter count. But even if you take the 1,600 out of that, there's still 1,000 units that we've helped to date, or 1,000 households for the 30% AMI, 590 for the 50% AMI, and 236 at the 80 or 115% AMI. Next slide. And that's really all we have today. We anticipate that our next meeting will be on January 7th at 9 a.m. Is there anything else that anybody would like to talk about? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so can someone make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
And Kelly seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you all so much. Have happy holidays, and I will see everybody in January.